Um, but yeah, guys, thank you for watching the SaDCast Saturday part. But now let's shift over, and I'll change the description now so people know that we're talking about the topic at hand, which is
Wait, whose
the
hand?
Thine own hand.
God.
Not be mine.
Oh my god.
That's what I said, or what Ethan said.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Oh god.
It's a rod again. Have you guys seen that? I know Spencer
On
and
the
MJ
road
have.
again.
On the road again.
I didn't sing that one. Somebody else did.
Yeah. So today's topic is kind of one that kind of snuck up on us because we actually, especially didn't actually know what we were going to talk about today. I was so close to just saying like we'll just do an AMA. We'll just talk free associate with stuff. But last night, yesterday, apparently Discord kind of blew up about some topics here, brought to us by our
It literally
own sad
blew
head.
up, and it
Yeah,
destroyed
we had to
my
rebuild
computer.
it.
It destroyed my computer.
Yeah.
I'm not happy about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, from our own SaDCast, SaDCast Fanatic. I forgot what they are.
Only they did it.
But Jeremy Ostreicher, and he talked about how on the Custom Menswear podcast, where Spencer talked about mainly our apprehensions with custom, not really about the monetary part, although that is why we have apprehensions about it.
Yeah.
But basically, he was talking about it here, and I think the second sentence he has in our Discord says, like, bespoke is not a consumer product. There is a gap between those who can indulge in custom as a lifestyle and those who buy into it piecemeal. It is a matter of class and lifestyle. And maybe I'll just read the whole thing because it's kind of framed around his, and he might join us if he wakes up on time, because I know he's in Australia, and so it'll be a little bit of a time difference for him. But I'll just read it out here, and we can pick apart. We can pick apart what we latch onto, because they did discuss this. You know, Kiyoshi was there last night, and a couple other people joined in. But he says here, as cringe it is when people talk about forging a relationship with a tailor, which I talked about in my essay. It is a business one, not a personal relationship. You are entering into a collaboration with a menswear house with a minimum order quantity of 1. This means it is
and
on
that's
you
not
with the
Menswear
process.
house. That's Menswear house.
Like a yeah.
And there's a space between.
Right.
Yeah.
And the moment it means that it's on you to go through the process of sampling, research, and the tailors are to consult as an expert. And that kind of echoes what we talked about last week, where we said something about, where a lot of people can go into it thinking they can get whatever they want out of it, where to
That's
that guy on Reddit.
Yeah.
There was that guy on Reddit who said, like, oh, well, when you go there, you should just let yourself go to the tailor, because, it's like you're going, a surgical consultation. You're not going to fight back on the surgeon. But there's a little bit, I mean, it's just a consumer product, like you said. So I think there's still a little bit of, I can challenge that idea a little bit. But yeah, he said you have to factor all this into the price of participating in custom menswear. You can outsource this, which is why some people go to stylists. But there is all that overhead, which makes it inaccessible, or only accessible to a different class. He says here, just as Gucci sells handbags to your girlfriend to covet and maybe afford, there is a consumer face at these houses. So basically he's saying you can have a piece, you can sample bespoke or get a simulation of it, but the authenticity of it is proportional to the price, which locks out people from getting the real experience. And yeah, that's kind of like his initial message that kind of spurred this kind of talk about is our places like Gucci or a related menswear brand selling a lifestyle, or are you buying like a designer thing? Like, are you buying like the art that or that you really enjoy? And there's also that fact that custom is a little bit more affordable nowadays. Not maybe not always the good kinds, but if you do,
there are more options.
Yeah, there's options. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I don't know where you guys want to start first. I mean, feel free. I'm gonna ask our pals in Discord, who are muted, for the sake of just our panel to message in live if they have something they want to latch onto while we discuss this open hand. But I know that this is maybe something we've talked about before, and I get asked this a lot as a person of color. But like, how do you feel about wearing menswear, which is typically seen as elitist, or and as some person of color, usually people of color are kind of locked out of those kind of things. But I did fight back on that when I get that message, because I do say the same thing that Young Chomsky said, where when you look back at like old photographs, you do see a lot of people of any race and creed wearing tailoring, especially like the mid-century or the early stuff. And that's kind of more of a different kind of topic, but I personally don't think it's too much of a class issue, but maybe we'll dance around there the more we talk about it.
Oh, we're gonna dance.
Because because it's kind of like, I talk this about with my mom a lot, and my mom is a very designer focused person. She immigrated here, and so she has like, very like work ethic kind of thing. So she's like, okay, well, if you want it, you should just pay for it, right? And you get what you pay for. And I do push back, saying like, well, is it fair maybe that like the people who want to be into menswear who can't afford it are stuck at like the H&M level, right? Is that fair to them? And of course, then she's like, well, what about like healthcare? And I'm like, well, that's different. Healthcare is not a consumer product. You shouldn't equate those two things together. But it does kind of bring to mind where like, um, yeah, there's like these having these things at different levels, like even the aesthetic differences. Is that fair? Is that a class thing? Because back in the old days, right? Every like tailoring, even if a suit was cheap in the 30s, it still looked like a good suit, and you could still pay for it, and it was still reasonable quality. Whereas now you can kind of see the aesthetic differences between a cheap suit and a more expensive or well-made garment. So I guess, does that mean like, unless you like, can you not have good taste, or is good taste inaccessible to you because of how much it costs? Is that kind of what that means?
So I mean, we've kind of I think talked about something similar to this, in that we've had
Hmm.
people who have said, "How do I dress like you if I can only afford H&M?" And we've said, "Well, you can't, but that doesn't mean you can't dress well." So I think there are maybe certain looks that are not maybe not necessarily inaccessible, but are
Yeah.
going to be much more difficult to get, to
Right.
kind of like,
Yeah,
yeah.
to get into. I mean, it's kind of
Hmm.
like it's a weird thing, right? Where you know there's an aspect of putting work into a hobby, right? Like I'm sure if you're talking like in like tech stuff, right? It's the same kind of thing where, you know,
There's a barrier to
if you
entry.
don't have enough, yeah, there's barriers to entry. Like you can like MJ could probably want to game as much as another guy, but based on income level, maybe that guy can't afford the good gaming computer, and so he can't enjoy the game to the extent that MJ can,
Hmm.
right? And I maybe of course Jeremy's not here in the chat yet. I don't think he's saying that, you know, MJ is at fault for it, but I think it's good to kind of be aware of these differences,
I'm
and
saying
to
that
kind of
MJ
see
is
the
at fault
privilege.
for it.
Just make more
Yeah, it's
money, bro. I
MJ's
don't, I don't
fault.
get it.
Yeah.
Just stop buying avocado toast in Starbucks. You can do
Oh
it.
my god, dude.
And then one day you can
Um,
afford a gaming PC.
Yeah, for
right.
$500 or whatever the entry level is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, um, yeah, because menswear again occupies like a weird space in fashion, because it's, as we've talked about in a lot of other streams and a lot of other podcasts, it's one of the few like modes of dress that is still tied to like a lifestyle. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like when you like now, rich people or rich assholes, poor people, middle class people, whatever, they all wear sweatpants. Like I think the rise of like, I don't know, designer stuff or whatever, or like that kind of casual world has kind of equalized that nature. But the suit is still like, well, if you own one, you're trying to, it's aspirational, or there's like a certain status level or class level
Mm.
associated with it, right? Like good suits are worn by these people, and if you're lower income, you have to buy a suit, otherwise you have to be taken, otherwise you won't be taken seriously at your job. You have to buy it to fit in, and there's always that aspect, where this is kind of a similar topic to like how do uniforms lock out people, right? That's kind of like a
Mhm.
similar kind of talk. Or not uniforms, or our dress codes classist, right? I think that's kind of a common um discussion on like MFA, and I think Dye Workwear has like a similar article on that kind of topic. But yeah, what I don't know, Spencer, when you read through it, what did you, or Matt, MJ, when you were looking through it, what did you guys see in the discussion?
I'll kick it over to Matt.
Well, yeah, I just mean like in this sort of it's a big topic to kind of unpack, because I do think that some people can see like all these Drake's pieces we talk about, and especially now how the prices are going up, and just feel just like this disconnect. Or people even like outside of it, if we talk about Drake's on social media and they're not really in menswear, and they are curious and they peek around and like, really, you're spend, and they like look at a price tag, you're spending all this money for something like this, when really that person might be getting it for sale or something like that, or like they just like it and are talking about it. So especially outside of the menswear community, it can reflect on people why they shut their brain off when people are into this kind of stuff. They think it's sort of the touting big money, when really it's just, I mean, you see it on the other side too with fast fashion and or not fast fashion, just like the high expensive streetwear being just as pricey as what you could find
and the
on
other kind of
eBay.
classes too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like that, like sneaker culture, right? To put, if you're talking about class issues in terms of like the amount, how much time and money you're able to invest in something, then I think sneakers are probably the most common one, right? Because
That's
Yeah.
a good one.
yeah, you could have like a boring fit, right? But
Mhm.
if you have like really cool sneakers, and it's like, oh, this guy is like in the know. He had the money to buy these like hype collab sneakers. It's something
Right.
that a regular person probably couldn't get into. You know,
Mhm.
so I see. Yeah, I mean, like you said, that there's a lot of parallels to this, to any kind of stuff. I mean, like sometimes there is a quality of difference in, like, if you were writing music with like a keyboard and like your Mac laptop compared to like a dedicated DAW, right? Like there's gonna be a difference there,
Mhm.
that is perceptible. Um, but we'll talk to someone who actually was in the discussion when it was happening, because I got into it in the tail end. Kiyoshi, what did you gather from this?
I thought it was actually a really good point that Jeremy made, that
Yeah.
differentiating just custom clothing from bespoke by the amount of money it takes to actually do real bespoke.
Right.
And granted, I think any one of us, if we wanted to, it's like if we wanted to save up for like a really nice watch or something like that,
Yeah.
we could do it. But you wouldn't be the kind of person who has like 10 or 12 or a couple dozen watches at thousands of dollars each or tens of thousands of dollars each in a vault
Right.
somewhere, right? It's a very different lifestyle. And in the same way, bespoke, and to truly be a bespoke lifestyle customer, it's very different. And that nature of that product, it is not a mass consumer product in the way that even a more expensive brand like, say, Drake's is,
Right.
or or these other brands, where it's something that takes a lot of time, alongside a lot of money, the ability to travel to certain places, to meet with tailors, and to really kind of spend the time and money and resources into getting something that you could really just walk in any department store at any price level and just buy. But you're getting something that's very specific and very unique. It's a one of one product each time, and it may not be perfect. That's the irony of it. After all that money
Yeah.
spent, so I mean, you
Right.
might
Yeah.
actually end up dissatisfied with it, honestly.
Yeah.
But it's not a pursuit for the average consumer, and I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind when in a lot of media, especially like media like The Rake, for instance, where it's just kind of like clearly the people
In
that they
that world.
portray
Yeah.
are people at a totally different price strata than most people that probably read the magazine, even, or follow them on Instagram for that matter. So I
Well,
think it's always good to
yeah.
like separate yourself from that. And I think that's the point Jeremy wanted to make, was that custom clothing and bespoke specifically is not something that,
A
we're
regular
ever going to
person.
really get like the taste of, to where you're
Yeah.
making like 20 suits at like Huntsman, you know.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, that's just not a thing that's probably not gonna happen to us anytime soon. And so to like really understand it from that point of view of the person and the clientele it's designed for, is very different than if we had saved up like bought like one suit and splurged, yes, like kind of like to treat ourselves, you know, to something like that. So I think that's a
Right.
very interesting idea to kind of like keep in mind when, you know, most of us are probably more attuned to, I would say, a mass consumer mindset,
Right.
where our our approach to purchasing items is going to be very different. And this is not
Yeah.
that kind of purchase in this kind of product. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, so that I think was like that's something I hadn't actually thought about, and that's what made me um, kind of think, oh yeah, wow, this is kind of a good point to whenever you talk about bespoke, that keeping that in the back of your mind
Yeah.
kind of helps you ground and get a little bit, bring you back to reality a little bit, that this is kind of like along those same lines of kind of like, you know, owning a yacht or something like that, where it's like, yeah, it's very different to like
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
and like
'Cause-
be invited on someone's yacht than it is to actually own one.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know?
Well, I mean, I think I that was kind of my intent. Yeah, again, like we didn't really touch on it, but I know in my essay I said like it's seen as like bespoke is like the end game of menswear, right? Like to get everything custom made. I guess I should have dived into a dove, I guess is the right word, onto what I meant by end game. But like it is like the ultimate like level that is not accessible by many people.
Yeah.
And I don't really know many people who even had bespoke stuff. I think Hector might be the only person who's done it, and he doesn't like he had like a local tailor in New York, which is like we said, there's levels to it. You know, like you can get a bespoke suit in LA, you know, but it's not going to be like the same bespoke level as like going like Chiffonelli or something like that. Like it's not, and I'm sure the suits are nice and they're good, but the experience that the stuff about it is a lot different. I guess usually when this stuff is happening, this discussion comes up. I always wonder is like, do we have to find a solution to it, right? Do we have to make menswear more accessible? Because and maybe it's brought up to me and Spencer a lot because we talk about menswear as something anyone can get into, but as we just said, that level you can't get into very easily.
Mhm.
Well, a while ago we
Um,
talked about the idea of people like could dress like us or then look like us. Would we want that? And I feel like a lot of us said no, we don't really want that for a lot of reasons. So it's almost like things becoming a little bit more accessible, you can lose a bit of the kind of uniqueness that can come
well,
with
I
sort of
guess
the
well, I
styles.
guess what I mean is I think this what comes down to what JTR was saying like farm to table stuff. That's kind of like making that idea a little bit more accessible of I don't know if fine dining is the right word, but that level of consumption or that type of consumption of food, right? Um
Mhm.
just like I mean you see it kind of now, right? Like direct to consumer stuff, right?
ETC, cut out
It's
the
going
middleman.
straight. DDC is kind of a big deal, right? Is like is that like a step in that direction of making it more accessible, right? I don't know if they've started out with that idea. I'm sure they saw it as just a moneymaker, right? They're like I don't think Indochino at the end of the day they're like, you know what, we're doing the world a service by showing the every man that he can get a custom suit. I'm pretty sure they're like, there's a market right here that we can just take advantage of, And
Mhm.
it doesn't mean you can't do both. It doesn't mean you can't do both, um, but yeah, it's like yeah, details. Is it farm to table as an aspirational or a restorative process? It's similar to custom clothing. Um, and he says here this is a little off topic, but kind of similar, where he says that on the hashtag menswear crowd, it's not about enjoying the good life. It's about enjoying a life better than others. I wonder if that outlook is a little I don't want to say
Cynical?
projection. Yeah,
Skewed.
cynical. Yeah, it's yeah because it's kind of hard to kind of go in there. It's kind of similar to the whole thing about, when Bruce Boyer assumes that the guy, like the old man with his son wearing the same skinny jeans as his son, is trying to be like the son. Like, what if that old man just likes skinny jeans? Like it's not.
He likes
It's
feeling
kind of a
denim
tough.
tight against his knees.
That's right.
Who doesn't?
He's
It's
still
what you
working
want.
on
It's
those
what you
sick
want out of
fades
your
at
hobby.
90 years
Right?
old.
Yeah, and like I don't when that idea when we talked about like do we want everyone to dress like us? I mean that's kind of different. I do wish that people would approach it this way because maybe then if we saw menswear or custom as like an aspirational investment thing, maybe people I don't know how people
I just
treat
feel
it,
like the
though.
main issue for people outside of menswear is I don't need this, and then that's why they buy the mall suit one
I mean,
time.
it's funny.
One time.
Yesterday I was talking with some friends. Ethan was there. I was talking about it's like, oh yeah, I was talking about a time I got a good deal on a shirt, and I said it was like $200, and I was like, oh, I mean, yeah, to
Wait a
everyone
minute.
else that sounds crazy. Like they've
Yeah.
never, like,
The most insane thing anyone's heard. Yeah, for people
yeah, it's
not
like $200
in the thing.
on one shirt, but
Yeah,
it
that's the
happens.
major disconnect. They just can't justify the costs or whatever. That even if we say, look, if we get down to brass tacks, if we skipped all the steps, all the thrifting, most like just to have even one made to measure suit, like most people, like
Mhm.
that's like most men, I think that would work. Like that's just you get it done. But yeah, I think it's hard to make that argument for someone who might not be as interested.
Yeah.
So then the question
Right.
is for the people that do care about it, how do you kind of work through that kind of cost difference?
Like well, I guess to make it more on topic, like do you feel like you're projecting that class and privilege on other people? You know what I mean? Like when you talk about how I don't think any of us talk like inherently about how expensive it is, but when you bring it up a conversation, like, oh yeah, I just bought these Shell Cordovan shoes, and you go, oh, that's cool. How much you get them for? And I'm like, oh, they're
Too much.
$750.
I guess I'm speaking in
Right.
my own personal experience that if I've tried to talk to people outside of menswear stuff and like the costs of these things that usually are, that's not just thrifted on eBay. Usually those eBay prices, those are fine with most people, but if like outside menswear, but if I tried to talk about I don't know, like a custom suit or anything, you know what I mean? That's when I hear from people like, really? Why would you? Like they just can't comprehend it. So I can't speak to on the whole what the system is. I know people have their own means, but that's just what I've noticed when talking to people who don't really understand some of those prices. And these are budget low tier things. That's what I also tell them, which they also can't wrap their head around. But so I guess I don't feel I'm projecting. I'm just talking from my own experience.
Well,
Do
the one
you-
thing I would go ahead, MJ.
So I was gonna say, do you? This can go for anybody. Do you guys talk about men's, or do you have like some people where you just don't talk menswear with?
Like it's
outside of
wise not
menswear?
to.
Yes.
Like, well, because
Yeah.
like that's the thing, right? Because I feel like when I do bring up menswear, even though if the person is not like a menswear person, I still know
They
enough about
understand.
them, yeah, that I know that they would understand, or that they have some
Yeah.
sort of like some equivalent, like
Well,
Ethan brought up like like sneaker guys, right, or sneakerheads.
Yeah.
Like I could talk
Yeah.
to another
Someone
guy,
has
like
their thing.
yeah, a couple of my coworkers are really into sneakers, or really into like hype beast stuff. So even though that they don't wear or dress similarly or the same way, they understand, like, oh, you pay like this
Or
much for
like
shoes.
I
Like,
have a lot of
you-
female friends that shovel money into pay to play games, and some people can scratch their head like, why do you do that? But it's like
Okay.
I like it. You know?
or like, or you
well-
have friends or acquaintances that are into buying art, or like paying for
Yeah.
I don't
Rugs.
know,
Yeah.
vinyl records and sound equipment, and they
Yeah, this idea to go
A
back
lot
to
of
the
people have
analog, yeah.
expensive hobbies, and
Yeah.
and I'll just say, I mean, like I feel like
All of
I'm
my
not, I
hobbies
don't
are
want to be an asshole, like be like, oh, there's
Go
double
for it.
standards in society, but you're gonna get much different reactions if you tell a relative stranger, I'm about to build a PC and I'm dropping like
$2,000 on it.
like $1,000 on it. We'll say
Yeah.
like we'll even just say $1,000. So most people would be like, oh, that's kind of neat. But yeah, if you told someone I spent $750 on one pair of shoes, that's when they're like,
Because I think
Crazy.
like being being like an enthusiast in like one hobby or like in one area, talking to an enthusiast in another area, it's easier to connect there versus, you know, hey, you're just a guy at the mall that I'm talking to for some reason.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's like some
That
mysticism around like
won't
tech
happen.
where it's like they don't know anything about it. Oh, 1,000, whatever, that kind of makes sense. But like they have their own
Well, that
personal thing for a shoe, and so like you say 750 is like what? I have
well,
my own. Like this is what I pay. That sounds crazy.
well, that's why again, classic menswear has a unique spot in people's minds where it is like this weird thing tied to like class and like lifestyle, right? Where like
Yeah.
I think nowadays if people say like, oh well, you know, like complex sneaker shopping, they don't, I mean, yes, some people might say like that's a lot of money, but you know, waiting in line and buying the expensive, you know, like CDG heart the heart fucking heart Converse stuff, right? Like that was kind of a big deal. And people don't really care about that. They cost more than a regular Converse shoe, right? So it's like people do have that, but when it comes to like, oh, when you say I bought a shell cordovan loafer, they can't fathom it. And that's just kind of that weird space that menswear kind of has. But I know, so Henrik said he has some few things to add on privilege in class. Henrik, why don't you tell us a little bit about your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I was thinking where exactly where to jump in. One is the menswear is a commodity as a luxury good, and it sort of follows certain sort of strictures that are placed on those, right? And those aren't entirely outside the scope of a middle class. I mean, it's something I learned when I sort of did some work in politics and so on. Even if you're like nominally middle class, and maybe who knows, people in the Discord sort of have probably not a huge leap maybe in terms of income between all of us that are on here, but there are very big differences. Like, you know, if you live in St. Louis, your rent is $800 a month and not 2,000.
Right.
And that's a suit a month.
What does that feel like?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and of course, if you have, I know, you know, normal families who pay $1,500 to $2,000 in health insurance a month, and if for whatever reason you're not in that position, you actually have some wiggle room for other things. Menswear is not real estate. It's not even bespoke huntsman suit is like theoretically possible on a school teacher's salary if you instead of a vacation or a honeymoon or something.
Right.
It's not. It isn't a yacht. It is in a different era there, and and I also have friends of mine who pay student loans to the tune of $2,000 a month because they went to law school, right, or med school. I don't. I don't have any student loans to pay. So
what's that
if you
like?
don't, then yeah, exactly, yeah. And that is a huge difference. And it's not, you know, exactly the same as what your current income level is, right? There is for at least, and you know, people who advertise for these things know that very well. They know that who can afford it. That's why the things you really can't afford you haven't actually heard about. It's how sort of what the really truly rich spend money on. You don't know that.
Yeah,
That
it's like
belongs
that.
to a
It's
different
like
kind of
buying islands and shit, right? Like that.
yeah, exactly. Islands.
Like that don't even
Are
show
you
up
just
on
talking
maps.
about?
You
We go to
know?
islands all the time, Ethan. And we're not rich.
Hey, even if we were, we would be there every
We'd
week.
still go to islands. We'd get the big wave.
Big way with
With
cheese.
cheese, baby, and
California regional
unlimited
restaurant
fries.
humor for you.
Hey, it's
Yeah.
like McDonald's, right? It's there for you when you're down here. It'll be there for you when you're up here.
Well, this is the thing. I feel like a lot of my friends, like they, even if they're into like fashion, they like, it's sort of like fast fashion, where it's like, that's kind of what they're into. And then they even say, oh, well, it falls apart, but it's always there. So that's kind of like the default, the reset, and things outside of that, it's hard to comprehend when it's always there for you, like you say with McDonald's. So it's just like, but they can't wrap their head around sort of environmental things or just like lack of just like like the fact that it really won't last as long as other pieces you could just invest time and money in. But so that there's that disconnect there as well, I think.
Right. That's, I mean,
Yeah, so privilege is sort of
Yeah.
unevenly distributed even through
Yeah.
income scales. You know, there are people who make a lot of money who are in fact very squeezed and cannot afford to buy $500, $600, $700, $100 shoes because they have
right.
other obligation, and menswear is like it's not a big enough thing to be determined in any one of those things. But it does have like the appearance of like a larger luxury than it in fact is, because not just of its associations, but because you need like a minimum of leisure. You know?
Mhm.
A bit like other elitist pursuits, you know, like fine arts or music or something. You need to have like a combination of actual resources, have some money to do it, and you need to have sort of the distance towards the necessity. You have to have like at a certain remove from the necessities of life, so that you have the time and the leisure time
Right.
to pursue these kind of things, right? And that's when it's sort of sad. So, so it has something similar to sort of other quote unquote luxury goods that aren't good for anything else except like reasons like the arts that way. And
Right.
therefore has like maybe undeservedly like a reputation for being class, but there isn't really materially that much that separates someone who can engage with menswear at our level and someone who cannot. It's not just
Right.
about that. Yeah, and also the class thing is also kind of almost redundant. Like no one's really socially mobile anymore anyway.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen in America anyway. There's no social mobility anymore. There's just like stagnation or downward mobility anyway. So we're all negotiating something very, very different. But I don't have the impression that clothing has become yet, unlike, you know, it's not really a class marker in the way other things. If you want to pick out, like as a sociologist, what is one thing you can pick out
Right.
that would mark American class, it won't be clothing.
But it's perceived that way, right?
It will probably be a zip code or something like that. It won't be clothing, even though people still have that attachment to it. You know?
Right.
But I don't
Yeah.
think
I mean,
it correlates at all.
The thing
Yeah.
I'd add is it sure is marketed that way though. Like
Yeah.
I kind of feel like, especially tailoring. I'm not talking like menswear, like it's in clothing, like Drake's or anything. Even like I'm saying, like tailoring specifically is at every point of price level, it is still marketed as like an aspirational style garment.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's like, you know, $500 suit at Suit Supply,
Yeah.
or, you
It's
know,
still,
suits from Kintanar or ACA or
or even
Brioni,
H&M
or that,
ads kind of have it too.
yeah, it's still kind of in this, it's all the same marketing. It's just has different price points. And I find that interesting that I can't think of a brand off top that is tailoring focus primarily and isn't trying to do aspirational marketing in their messaging.
Yeah, that's a big one, because it is kind of like that kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Where like the brands do that and then people believe it, and then you kind of, it just kind of lumps in there. Um I I really wish there was a way to fight it, or there's a way to kind of combat that whole thing. But then is it a little bit of projection? Are we thinking like when like if we just see a guy wearing a suit, right? Are we assuming that it's luxurious, that he has a luxurious lifestyle, even if he's like independent of anything else? Like, it's like just a model with a plain background.
Every time I see
Or
a
is
person in a suit, I say, "Hey, can I have some money?"
Hey, can I get
Because
can I get the
decide-
You missed it.
I assume that they have enough to spare.
At least a hay penny.
Me too. That's what I do. I just go, hey, hey, hey. Yeah.
Hey, I
Hey,
do this to
hey,
every
hey.
person I see wearing a suit.
Like, hey.
Yeah.
Sometimes
we
I get confused with myself in the mirror.
You just throw money at the mirror.
That's kind of funny. When I was driving early today, I did see like I was at a stop sign and there was like a bird on a car, and it looked at like the side view mirror and it started like trying to fly into the side view mirror, and I'm like, bro, like that's you, man, like that's like not
I-
not on my
Don't
car.
get
I
my
just I
cat,
was
like,
I just
Bird,
He's dumb as
you were
shit.
just getting so mad at how dumb this bird was being.
yeah, I was like, I don't want him to die or fucking like flip out, come on,
Mhm.
man. But yeah, no, it's the marketing
Well, I
behind
mean,
menswear is weird. Go ahead, Matt.
Well, I mean, we talk about all this all the time, and it's slightly tangential of like how people carry themselves. So we see a guy on the street in a suit. I mean, it's just like if he's just doing his job, like or whatever, or if he's like a strut, like Antonio or whatever. I don't know. So I feel like again, how people carry themselves in these kind of things, or how they wear it, that plays a role too in perception. If people are peacocking or like boasting about it, or like just looking smug, that certainly doesn't help this narrative. But or even just what they wear it with. So that's another layer to all of this. So yeah, this is a
Right.
hard nut to crack.
You're right
I
about that.
mean, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, right? It's still the only thing that I can latch on to is what Henrik said about how, like with any kind of pursuit, especially like fine arts, the real kind of barrier is just time, right? Like that's something that might be attributed to like your place or your, I guess, your class in the world, right? Where how much leisure time do you have to get into this pursuit? We talked about that briefly, I think, Spencer, with Young Chomsky, as in his podcast episode. Um, but it's that, yeah, that weird idea where, like Spencer said, you can't dress like the way we do in the Discord from H&M, but you also don't have to spend a lot of money to do that. It just takes time and effort to do
Yeah.
it. And that is kind of hard if you want, again, the cheat code to getting there,
Yeah,
right?
they want the
Like
quick fix.
yeah, and that is something apparently that's everywhere, obviously, not just menswear, as we've seen from like, young men real style.
Gross.
Real
Oh, can we
real
Gross.
can we
men,
make that
you
channel?
know,
Can we make
Let's
that?
let's get that
yeah,
domain,
yeah,
boys.
yeah. Should have had that when we had April Fools. Just change the server name real quick.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Everyone leaves.
But it's it's an idea, because it's now you don't have to build your gaming computer. You can just buy a pre-made one, right? Or not even Alienware. You can like buy, like, there are services that build it for you, and they, you pay
Yeah.
them and then they ship it to you, just like Young Chomsky
And
did.
Henry Cavill comes over.
Yeah, Henry Cavill
Yeah,
comes
he'll
over.
he'll build it
Um,
personally for you.
Shirtless,
And
of
that's
course.
why,
He loves
like,
doing it.
you've got I got into a couple arguments, right, about like stylists,
Mm.
right? Like, not
Yeah.
like why that is like a thing, because I cannot fathom that, having someone tell you what to wear or suggest it to you in that kind of top down way, not like a friend working like we do here, like, oh, you should try this or whatever. It's a conversation thing. Now it's like, okay, I'll just do what this guy's telling me to do, right?
I mean,
And
I
I'm sure
see
there are
the way I see it, it's like why you go to a mechanic instead of learning how to fix your car yourself, you know?
Right.
but then
Exactly.
that's kind of a privilege, right? Like,
Yes,
that's
this is
kind of a
this is
thing.
talking about
I mean, having a
privilege where it's
stylist,
like-
yes, is a privilege. Like, you're not gonna. There's no poor people that have personal stylists.
But yeah, like
Um,
if you don't have as many opportunities,
My
you
own
might have to
personal
learn
stylist.
how
If
to
you
be
just-
handy.
If you just don't care as much about fashion and don't care to put in the work yourself, I understand why you would pay someone who knows about fashion and is stylish
I think
to
think
tell
time
you what
also-
looks good to wear.
time comes into play with this
Yeah.
because it's like they might not have time to learn about eBay or buying things like that. They might not have
I mean,
that luxury.
I don't think
That's a
I don't
luxury.
think the people who have stylists are shopping much on eBay.
No, that's not what I mean. I'm saying these
Yeah.
people who don't have, like, they can't afford stylists. Like, we talked about time as luxury in and of itself, so they might not be able to learn about it, how to fix a car. It's mostly by experience. That's what we all do. We all do. We all learn through this experience, and that takes time. So,
Yeah.
same kind of deal.
Well, it's that idea now that
by doing.
All of these things, technically, they need to record. They have time baked in, like you said. Like, you are supposed to go through this whole journey. You're supposed to do that kind of stuff. Just like, there's no shortcuts to being an artist, right? Like, you can't just you're supposed to develop. You're supposed to go, maybe go to
Right.
school or learn or whatever to get there. And that's why I never really think about menswear as like a class issue. Even
Mm.
before what Henrik said about like there's not really a monetary difference because like yeah, people spend probably more money on like concerts than like a bespoke suit of like or like a custom suit, for us or something like that, right? Like it just
Yeah,
it's about
cumulative. Yeah.
it's about an allocation of funds rather than like a distinct income level luxury that you can enjoy, right? Um, but
But yeah, it has that perception where it's like the person who spends however much money on festivals every year, they're not gonna and especially what they're not gonna look at those people and then look at someone like us wearing perfectly tailored garments that fit perfectly and just look like $1 million to them, and just like they're not gonna draw those same comparisons with fund allocation, So it's a hard thing to break for this kind of stuff, and that honestly does impact my style. Or where in context and things like this, I do think about these things pretty much in every single style context, because I don't want to come off as this dandy person, So I allow that perception to impact me, but while still maintaining my own personal style and point of view, basically, to kind of counteract that a bit.
right. Yeah, I mean,
Does anyone else
I
do that?
think-
To some
think
degree.
Yes.
I think most people
Just
do.
checking to make sure I'm not fucking insane.
Yeah.
Well,
100%.
Only partially, Jason, right?
Do you
Kyoji,
think
what were you
that?
saying?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah. I mean, that's actually something that, in I guess maybe the past year, at work, because should probably wear tailored clothing while I sell it.
Yeah.
eh.
I've definitely tried to look less, dandyish,
Yeah.
stereotypical, suit and tie guy. Partially just by losing the tie, but also just in the fabrics I'm picking and the colors I'm wearing. Try not to look stuffy, quote unquote dapper.
Approachable,
Yeah, just because I want to bring it down, because like every guy that walks in my office, almost none of them are even wearing a dress shirt. Like everyone is in
Right.
t-shirts or like Under Armour or jeans. It's very, very casual. That is how, and that doesn't matter, price bracket, job, anything. I think I've only had a handful of lawyers who have come like from the office wearing what is essentially business casual.
Okay.
Be like the most dressed up. Like they might have like shirt, tie, and slacks. So it's very rare that the clientele I'm selling to is also simultaneously as dressed up as I am or as I was. So it's been an effort on my part at work to dress down even when I am dressed up. So I think it's helps make tailoring more approachable when you don't feel like someone is looking across from you like the way they would at a boardroom or something.
Yeah, and it's like the Drake's thing where it's like, oh, you can do that with that. Even if they don't know all these details like a patch pocket or just like it's a general vibe, it's a general aloofness that does come across in some way. I'm sure it does to some people. Just like, oh, like that's possible. Or how can I do that? And they can't put their finger on it, but it's just a feeling. And that's a good start, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't know what you were gonna say before prior, because I was gonna say I hope I'm not switching gears by saying this, but do you think that kind of plays in with our like quote unquote like I wouldn't say goal, more like lead by example sort of thing, showing that or kind of removing, I guess this what some people would call a stigma towards classic menswear or
it's like choices you can make that can kind of help to kind of erase this stigma a little bit. We all kind of have these similar sensibilities with our, but despite our different styles, but generally the same thing. We can choose maybe to skip like the like what you would see, you know, the Cape Cod, like the navy blazer with white pants and like black dress shoes, like where we could just do easier options that still nice, still us, but it's like, you know, it's just subverting those connotations a little bit. So I think so. I think it does kind of
Well,
bleed into our heads a little bit.
yeah. Something that kind of Eric, I guess, kind of brought up. It inspired me something. He says it's weird being in Kiyoshi's position as a seller and consumer of menswear. I would also say that when you're talking about like there's also a big income disparity between the people who buy high-end menswear and the people who sell high-end menswear.
Oh my
Like
fucking
that is
god, yeah.
there, you know, like, you know, when you work at these places, you know, you make like, yeah, commission, but you know, the only reason these shop guys get to wear Drakes or Bespoke is because, you know, you write it off as a business expense, because there's no way like a shop guy could afford to regularly buy a Bespoke. Maybe. Again, maybe he could, like Hendrik said, if that money was allocated to different places, but
Or generous
typically, you know,
discounts.
yeah. But it's one of those, that's kind of like a weird thing too, where I'm sure the reason why they do it, right, is like kind of like Kiyoshi said, well, you have to kind of, if you're selling it, you should look the part. And I'm sure that plays into like the perceived class issues, aspirational stuff that come with menswear, right? Because when you go to the store, you're being met by someone who is wearing something tailored, and that kind of adds in the kind of very top down view of, okay, well, this guy should, as a consumer, me, if I see a guy, I'll be like, okay, this guy should know what he's doing. I need to like trust this man, you know, and that could potentially
With your
tie into
life.
that idea
Yes.
with your life. Yeah. But yeah, I always say that was kind of, you know, very interesting, because even though, yeah, I worked in menswear, but I did not enjoy any kind of semblance of that menswear quote lifestyle. Even though, as we've discussed too, right, we don't like, there really isn't that kind of menswear lifestyle. Even people in menswear, as Ivan said earlier, they people who enjoy menswear, they already know that the rake isn't real life. Um, and it's funny because we talked about the rake, and they have like their rake tailored garments, and it's like pretty cheap comparatively. I think it was like $600 for a jacket and like
Is
three
that
hundred dollars for
right?
pants. Yeah, let me check it out right now. The rake tailored garments. I remember like on Instagram I saw something that it was really cheap. I'm looking at it here. Let me pull it up. Uh oh my god. No, it's it's tan wool gabardine jacket 580, and
Okay. Damn.
the
Wow.
pants are 195.
I
And it's
can't
kind of
do
funny
that.
where even then, right? The rake still as like one of like the, you know, the modern voice of classic elegance, that is the literal uh headline, you know, like the mod or the slogan or whatever you want to call it, the mantra of the rake. Even they have to kind of acknowledge that maybe the consumers can't afford the things that are on the cover, you
Mm-hmm.
know. um and I remember before they started this, they had I got a year's worth of subscription to the rake for it, where I kind of posted about how this was like 2-3 years ago, um where the rake started doing the rake values, where people, they would
Huh.
kind of, it's kind of like the Drake's archive sale, like things that didn't
Yeah.
sell previous seasons. Because the rake, if you guys haven't listened to the Blammo episode or the Handcut Radio, I forgot which one it is, but the Waco said that they wanted to make it like a Mr. Porter thing, but also have the journalistic part, or the publication, because it's like, okay, you read about the stuff and you want to buy it. It's a step up above, like, I don't know if GQ has a store, they probably do now, but it's like that aspect where, you know, you're tying in the editorial to the to the actual supply that you have, right? And they did the rake values because, you know, there are guys like Ethan and Spencer who like that stuff, but we can't afford the original stuff, so they do that. And then now you've got the rake tailored garments, which make it slightly above like a Spear and McKay suit, you know, which is crazy, right? Like that's, and it's still, you know, very high end. Like I can put the link here in the chat for you guys to see it. I'll put it here and I'll put it here. But like, you know, it's still got the kind of elegant marketing and all the product pictures, you know. Yeah, navy, wow, navy cotton drill pleated trousers 150.
Damn.
Yeah, all sizes still available.
Huh.
That's cheaper than like that's.
How can you afford not to buy it?
That is pretty crazy.
I'm like almost gonna buy it, man. Like, come on, it's high waisted, double pleated. It's crazy.
That is pretty good.
150. That's like the cheapest pair of pants I've ever seen, man.
I don't believe that. I think you've probably seen
like,
a
at
pair
least
of pants from somewhere else.
that's true. I remember my friend Scott. As some of you guys have seen him in the chat before, we were at the mall in near our college, and there was this, I forgot what it was called, some Korean store that sold like basically like black mannequin type of outfits. And
Yeah.
Scott found $1 pants. Like,
Oh my god.
it was like $7, and then they were like
Marked
discounted.
down.
And yeah, it was like in a not a barrel, but like in like the sales section, it was like $1. And Scott was like, yeah, and he got $1 worth of wear out of it. And I think I got in like the 5th wear. Like they ripped in like the seat, like just
Oh,
they were like, yeah,
no.
they're like
There
cotton
it is.
poly stretch kind of a thing, you know?
Yeah, just have to imagine they
Like
were
one-
so thin.
Yeah. But it's, I mean, I'm sure, and they, like the black mannequin stuff is also kind of a signal of how like menswear is perceived. Like it's supposed to look cool, right? Like there's that aspect. I mean, I guess everything has to look cool. Everything has that kind of has to have a degree of sellability. But maybe it's just the bias. Maybe because we're coming at it from a very like, well, fuck the original menswear stuff. Like the connotations. Why don't we make it more accessible for everybody?
Mhm.
And accessibility is one thing I wanted to touch upon earlier.
Sure. Yeah.
Because we talk about what is actually available to people based on class, and we don't live in that era anymore, where like the mods and the teddy boys of the 40s and 50s, right, who were working class people who found their way into the forefronts of menswear, right?
Right.
That's not happening really anymore.
Mhm.
I can't think of the last time something like the early streetwear were perhaps something like this, but that's a long time ago. That's like the 90s or mid to late 90s,
Yeah.
where people who weren't sort of middle class. And I'm just reminded of like a parallel thing that's happened in athletics over the past 20 to 30 years. Like it used to be that athletes had a working class background. That's almost never the case anymore. They are lower to middle class people. You need basically access to resources to even be able to become like a football star or a basketball star. So the share of working class people who compete at the Olympics, for instance, has gone down by a lot. And the people who win medals at the Olympic Games are now almost never working class. And menswear sort of, I think, suffer from a similar idea that it's not really possible to follow that sort of classical sort of aspirational, even on the subversive pattern of punk or something like that, isn't really a path from like a class trajectory. It's just subversion within, it's just factions within the middle class who are subverting each other's point of view. It's not really sort of a class dynamics anymore. It's just this sort of internecine battles of an overall declining middle class, which makes for a very different atmosphere. And I don't think you can sort of compare it to accessibility. And the aspirational part is just sort of I think the sort of the way the communication got stuck. Much like education, for instance, like in education, all colleges are aspirational advertising as well. How can they not be, right? But the real message is, of course, go to college or become poor. The real message that everyone gets, no matter how aspirational the ad is, right? So the real one, sort of in menswear, sort of maybe like to get the suit, sort of the real message is sort of, okay, the advertising is aspirational, but the message is you're a loser if you don't buy a suit. Or at least you're as much of a loser as every other indicator in life confirm that you are.
I think it's so tied to that success. Yeah. So that's a tribute. Like they very much reflect inward when they see someone wearing that, just like almost like they're attacking them. Like you're saying, "I'm not successful because I'm not in your suit. Fuck you." So yeah,
Well,
I think
that
that can happen.
They did talk about this briefly, I think, in the in a part like about competition, right? Like how that plays into it. Does that is competition inspiring, or is it, you know, useless in terms of, you know, where the energy is being spent, right? Um, let me take a
Who's
look here.
competing?
What was that, Henrik?
Who's competing? I mean, it's against
Right,
whom?
yeah. It's
Well,
it was interesting.
it's more like you're not competing against someone that is, you know, above you, but more so amongst your peers. You know,
Yeah,
I kind of
exactly.
feel like a lot of it just appears this way to me. I could be misreading why people do this, but it always appears to me that a lot of the people that are like, let's say the Instagram influencers, whatever, and or those types, like they're not like really an influencer, but the people that always post these kind of aspirational modern gentlemen, whatever. Um, it always it seems like the people they're speaking to are their contemporaries, the people around them, you know. And it's a little bit of an internet version of keeping up with the Joneses,
Yes.
except you would be perceived as the Jones.
Yeah.
And you want people to start keeping up with you and get on your level.
Right.
And that is like but it's all kind of like around like the same, you know, again, marketed lifestyle idea that a lot of the brands and companies put out there alongside tailored clothing. You know, it's, oh, I'm driving this car today, or I'm smoking a Davidoff cigar, or like whatever. Like it's it, it's all this kind of, it's almost like you're speaking to people of the same class or of the same, like, more or less strata that you are in. And but by wearing these clothes and by, you know, essentially showing off, you kind of try to elevate yourself above those around you.
Yeah.
But you know, at the end of the day, it always strikes me as very hollow and, I guess, for lack of better words,
Well,
cringe.
yeah,
Yeah.
because you know, I was gonna say, like, yeah, what you're saying is very apt, because it could, yeah, it's the result of what Henrik said about, like, there not really being this kind of social mobility anymore. You can only flex on your contemporaries now. You can't really flex on the poor people, because, you know, it's just, yeah, now these menswear guys are just talking to, like, friends, family, and other menswear guys who, um they're just trying to say, like, "Oh, well, I'm thinking about it way different than you are. I'm on this, like, level that you're not," or whatever. And that ties into, and we'll get this in the future sometime about,
Who's the better
you
poor
know.
person?
Well, you
That's
know,
basically what
it's
it
like,
is.
it's well, not just that too, but it's like, you know, who can be perceived as the most cultured, right? Like I said, like, I know in the future we'll talk about the cringy, like, quoting literature in your fit pick kind of a thing and whatever. Like,
Right.
all of that
It's like,
kind
oh,
of
look
stuff.
how
So it's
cultured I am. You're not as
right,
cultured as me because you're
because
not as
and
rich.
right, and maybe that is because of how clothing has been democratized, or there's less of that class differentiating, right? Where, you know, uh, when any guy can get, like, a double-breasted wide lapel jacket from Indochino or from Food Supply or whatever, what will set you apart? Oh, it's the fact that you looked up this motivational quote from fucking, I can't even think of a motivator right now. I'm stupid. But
That's your
Gary
quote?
Vee.
but it's yeah, Gary Vee, some, or like some, you know, or like fucking Marcus Aurelius, some shit, you know, like, that's fucking disgusting. Um, but yeah, it's like, it's that aspect where, like, you know, there are other ways to kind of signal that, to kind of, you know, maybe it's not class, but it's about trying to be cooler or perceived that way, or just you're trying to compete culturally, I guess, with these people. And then that's why maybe we still have these ideas where if it's not a certain menswear brand, it's not good. And the thing that we've all found is that just because it's not fucking Drake's or talked about on stuff doesn't mean it's not a good brand, right? Like I think when I talk to Chase, right, like Jay Muser, like he would say like that Jay Muser is probably, it's definitely it's bespoke and whatever, it's better made than Drake's, but people don't really think about Jay Muser as much compared to Drake's. And I would have to agree, even in terms of like if it's not just marketing, I'm sure it's still just a widely different thing in the minds of the consumers, right?
Well, you gotta keep in mind, like a lot of
It's
bespoke
a taste
places
thing.
also don't run ads or anything. Doesn't so they're not
Right,
in the
yeah.
forefront. They're not running ads. They're not spending the money on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and there's even I think like Urban Composition. I think he wrote about this maybe a couple years ago. But I know he's like one of his favorite like Neapolitan tailors, just like some random dude, where he had to go in presumably with someone from Style Forum to kind of be his translator because he found it and it makes some of his really cool bespoke stuff. Um, and of course, it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be like, oh, Liverano. It's not going to have that same kind of cult aspect behind it, right? Like I'm sure MJ could say, like there are a lot of other. Well, I don't know, but maybe in tech, brand names are more important because whatever. But maybe there's
Probably
at least
yes.
there, right? Like you can still have a good processor that's not Alienware or whatever shit, right? Like you don't have to just default to like the big names to get a good
Mhm.
computer or a good build, right? Um, well, let me look here at Tash Terms. He says, no matter how dressed down or dressed up someone thinks they are, they'll always be unapproachable to someone. I think the perception of Danny differs from person to person. I think it's about feeling at ease in your clothes and convey an approachable body language. To me, that's what makes someone approachable. Clothing sends approachable or unapproachable messages depending on what person's prejudices are against formal or casual wear. He also says some people find cool intimidating and therefore find people who are dressed down and looking cool unapproachable. More moral is feel at ease. No, the moral is to feel at ease in your clothes and don't feel that you're better than anyone else. That's the aura that gives off an approachable vibe to people. Um, yeah, I mean, like we said, I think a lot of the stuff with menswear is that it's kind of internalized at this point. Even though it's clearly not that much, right? Like um there are probably stuff at cost that's cost more than like a tailored garment from I don't know, maybe H&M. I don't know what the equivalent is of cost to menswear, you know? And just there are probably things that are the exact same price of suit supply from like another, maybe more casual place or something like that, right? But what you're wearing will still kind of and everyone's gonna judge you. I think we've kind of went through that. All that you can do is kind of change your attitude about and that's what it kinda ties into what Henrik was saying where when you're subverting it, it's not really like it's not the classic punk way, it's more just subverting what your peers' perspective is on it rather than, like, saying, "Fuck you to the man," because at least now in menswear, like, there in fashion, there's not really, like, the man anymore, right? There is none of that, like there's not that class perceived dress, right? As there's not that dress code, like, in terms of, like, social strata anymore either, right? Um, but yeah. Okay, David also says, "This is the point he was making last week, which says I don't want my friends feeling uncomfortable when I wear menswear around them. I don't want them to feel any kind of aspirational feelings. I don't want them to feel like they should or want to dress better around me. I want them to be relaxed. So I usually don't know how I really want to what do you really want to wear when you want to hang? And self-reflection is a dangerous feeling for most." And then David Coggins. Oh, maybe if that's a quote from like a motivational thing about style or something. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I hope that most of us, right? I think we've talked a lot about our context in previous streams, but I don't think that any of us, hopefully not, don't push that on people. What do you
Yeah,
guys? I know Matt said a little bit about the reaction he can get when they're talking just casual about clothes, but what about the rest of you guys? Or Spencer, I guess.
I mean, no, yeah, I don't think. I mean, I wouldn't say that we push things on people, and I'd say yesterday was a good example of that, where we were both wearing sport coats, but I don't feel like we were particularly dressed up, or I mean, I think this all goes back to a lot of this being kind of behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta, as long as you don't like
Okay.
act like an asshole, you'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know where we go from here because, you know, I'm sure if Aldrich was here, he would say it's always going to be an uphill battle, right? To kind of fight this weird aspirational stuff that's pushed on menswear. And even though if we say that it's not really there, some people do think that way. Of course, we can only affect what we have in front of us, like our friends or whoever that see us on Instagram and combat that. But I think it also comes. I mean, I feel like this conversation kind of comes up with biases toward bespoke anyway, right? Like I think like I said, there are a lot of times before where people would talk about like oh yeah, writing about menswear is the most privileged thing of all time, right? Because it's so tied to class. And I think that if you're coming at it from that mindset, yeah, of course it's going to be hard to kind of change your mind from that mindset because it is expensive and some of the good stuff is that way. I don't, again, like I said, I don't really know um what the solution is. But maybe it's like that idea that, like we talked about with Kyoshi, where you come at it from like a consumer mindset more so than like a lifestyle thing where it is something that's very considered. And if people talk more about that, which in menswear isn't really talked about that much, at least in my perspective, but that idea of like, the anxieties or overdressing, I feel like that kind of equalizes it out and shows that, it's just like anybody else, right? Like it's just a thing that you can be into that is
Well,
similar to any other hobby.
I think it's with all privilege, like this lesson of just being like, you're not a bad person for having privilege. You're not a bad person for owning TaylorCade, whatever. Like, it's just a thing of
Yeah.
being aware of it, being aware of that privilege, and just like having that cognizant. So you're not an asshole. So you're not just like assuming people
David
can pick it
Cognizant.
up. David Cognizant.
Okay.
I believe he said that. So yeah, I think I mean, there's no simple solution to this, but I think it's just a thing to be aware of as we go about. And I think we all, for the most part, are. So that's why we generally can kind of combat this issue with us. And I
Right.
think as we grow our community, hopefully that message seeds out.
Yeah.
I'd like to
uh,
jump in here and
yeah,
make a point
go ahead.
about masculinity, which I think kind of plays into the psychology of this.
Sure.
There's a lot of blogging and vlogging that happens surrounding the idea of transitioning from being a boy into being a man. And
Right.
there's a lot of things that people have attached to that idea of growing up, but not necessarily like growing up. This very specific idea of becoming a man, and it's things like cooking in a cast iron pan, and learning to like wine, and
Hey,
learning
cooking
to
a cast
drive
iron
stick.
pan is the best.
No, like all these things are great. Like
Yeah.
I've got a car with a stick shift. I love it. But I think menswear and style is one of those things that can very easily, just like anything, be co-opted into this messaging of having of this idea of like you are no longer a boy, you are now a man, and you're going to do man things with man responsibilities. And it's this idea where if you don't fit that idealized manly image, then you are going to feel cut out of whatever thing they're trying to sell to you. And we talked about the luxury aspirational marketing behind menswear, and I think behind that even is this idea of masculinity that I think for a lot of modern people, young people, is not really a concept that we identify with as much as previous generations.
Absolutely.
There's
I
more
think
distance, it almost seems, yeah.
or rejection of that path or that
Yeah.
that transition. No, I think, I mean, that's probably one of the basis behind the blog and most of the rest of us, right, Spence? I mean,
Yeah,
we
I'd
don't.
say so.
It was. It's all. I mean, it's just that idea, right? Where if anything about this is a subversive, if we dumb down the blog, the podcast, and everything that we do here, it's that we realize these are clothes, but it's just specific clothes, and it's not tied to anything like, well, this is the correct clothes. It's just that we like that specific thing, and unfortunately, there are higher costs associated with that compared to a normal thing. But it's just like any other hobby. Any hobby like requires money and time. I guess you could make the argument that having a hobby is a privilege. I mean, that is a real thing, because otherwise,
If
if you
you're a
didn't
hobby,
have the
you have
time to do a hobby,
privilege.
yeah, I mean, you'd be like working all the time, right? Like I think,
Yeah.
like being like, I think I was talking, I was talking to my mom about this, where like, yeah, it's like food, right? Where to get good, like to even just to buy healthy food, right, takes time and education, and some people aren't afforded that. That's why you have like food scarcity, right, and food deserts or whatever, where people aren't able to do that, or you're locked out, and people from lower incomes eat, at least before, shittier food, not like shitty in terms of junk food, but like just unhealthier food because of the way it's priced at compared to something that is more healthy for you. So
Or
there's always going to be
location.
like that kind of like or location, like, and like Henrik said, right? I mean, unfortunately Henrik had to sign off, but if there is anything left, it's zip codes that are kind of like the actual physical delineator of class, right? And that plays into like schools and where you go and education. So there is going to be that kind of stuff, and you know uh some people aren't afforded the ability to pursue these things as hobbies. um I don't know what the answer to that is, but I hope that it the more people look at it as a hobby and as just as valid as any other interest, I think that'll help people kind of get into it. Something that's kind of related, but I'm concerned what David's saying here about not making people feel like they're dressed schlubby. I don't know that you can exactly do that, because if they think they look schlubby, then they probably look schlubby. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
that's on them.
Self-fulfilling
I'm gonna dress
prophecy.
however I want. They can read their own outfits however they want.
yeah.
I've definitely been in menswear looks in which I have felt schlubby, so I don't think it's necessarily exclusive to one style.
Intentional schlubbiness.
Yeah. I mean, there was when I was at the it's just one of those things when you know the details of something, it's really hard to separate. Like I went to the WM Brown thing in Sid Mashburn when he was visiting, and I was wearing my Atelier Fugue suit, and I didn't think I was gonna go because I didn't want to go there by myself, because I had to pay for parking, and I'm like, this is not gonna be worth it. And but my friend Ryan was there, and my friend Michael was there as well, and um I was wearing, my Atelier Fugue suit. I'm not sure what the shirt and tie combination. I think it was my Kamakura shirt, OCB button-down collar shirt. That was the vintage Ivy one, and that one is not meant to be worn with a tie because it does not. It is so short and there's no roll to it, which is odd. With like a solid tie, and then I was wearing Alan Edmonds suede cap toes, and I felt schlubby in the sense that like my collar wasn't the right one, because I was wearing it that day with a tie because I wanted to try it out. And then I also, my Alan Edmonds suede cap toes, I like them. They're cool. But they have kind of a lot of toe spring. Not a lot, but just I already noticed at this point that I don't want toe spring, and toe spring is kind of like a visual representation of a shoe that's not as good. That's probably a personal thing. But compared to like an Alden, there is just significantly more toe spring. Um, and I felt like I wasn't dressed cool enough at this WM Brown thing. You know what I mean? Like everyone there's probably wearing Aldens or Belgians and whatever, and I'm wearing, it's also a cotton stretch suit that my friend had. But it's still like I'm not wearing like fucking like Thousand Yard Style was there, and he was wearing a linen Anglo-Italian suit. right? And Sid is there wearing his made to measure, and there's a lot of and that guy Khalid Nasser from Sartoria. I forgot what his name is, his Instagram name is, but he's wearing his bespoke jackets with the crazy lapels and everything, and I'm like, man, I look like a hashtag Menswear IG guy who takes pictures with his chest in a dark background here. I don't feel like I was
call
being
out.
like that Ethan. And
you weren't drinking a Negroni, so what was the point?
yeah, I didn't drink one that
You
night.
didn't have a tray of meat. What was the point?
Yeah, I know. Hey, me and Spencer had a Negroni the following day, I think, when it was at the bloke, right? Like, and that was like the next day.
That's right.
I had one
Gotta be
too.
honest, wasn't a huge fan of that Negroni.
Really?
I had to pretend because Matt Hranick made it for me.
Yeah,
you got one from. I didn't get one from Matt Hranick. We got there, and there was already like a pre-made pitcher full of Negroni, and they just poured me one of them. So I think
he was just making it for like random people. Like he was just like handing it to people.
Yeah,
so he got.
MJ had. You talk about class stuff. I mean, MJ had the literal Matt Hranick experience where Matt is telling like a story about like visiting some fucking hotel in France while he's like making MJ a Negroni in front of us. It was like such a cool guy move where he's Matt's like I mean I don't want to say like a professional socialite in a bad way, but he has a very like on persona, right? Like he is like this guy who has like traveled and
he does this
photograph stuff and has a magazine, right?
Can you imagine if like you give a Negroni to MJ and MJ was like, actually, I don't like this Negroni. You'd be crushed. Your life would be over.
No, the worst one is when you go to hang out with the Drake's guys and they go, Ethan, what do you want to drink? And go, I actually don't drink a lot of alcohol, and you're the only one there not drinking alcohol at this cool bar with the Menswear guys.
Oh no!
Well, it's like that scene in Back to the Future too,
that would be me,
right? Where Doc's just holding the whiskey or whatever it was. He's like,
he just likes to hold it. Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I drink now. I mean, it's just something. Yeah, it's just like a thing where you just have to get used to it, and you have to if you really want to get into it. And at the time, like I had no moral quandaries about drinking. It was just mainly like it's like when I drink I don't drink soda now because I never really grew up with soda, but like accidentally getting a Sprite, I was like, fuck this, dude. I expected water. It's like that experience. And then the more and more you kind of gain an appreciation for it, the more it'll be better for you. And that could be, say, with events where we're like, yeah, at first it's like, fuck this, like this suit thing. Why do I want to wear this when I could wear a tie or when I could wear a t-shirt? But it's like, the more and more time you spend with it and you develop it into a hobby, into an interest, that's when you can kind of start tearing down those old expectations or maybe not expectations or preconceptions about menswear and everything. Of course, only if you want to, right? Like that's kind of the thing.
You gotta want it.
Yeah. Frog Lover 614. That's a new game. I haven't heard that.
Frogs.
Yeah. He says here there's a lot of classic signifiers regarding clothing. I think classic menswear is definitely seen by most of society as a sign of wealth somewhat. So wearing classic menswear might, while not being upper or middle class, works as a subversion of class, especially when efforts aren't being made to assimilate into the kind of snooty-ish preconceptions surrounding menswear. He just thought this was interesting. Yeah, I do agree with you, but I think that at the like I think what we discussed earlier is that in reality it's not really the case because not that you can't subvert people's expectations, but on paper in terms of money, we talked to Henrik who was here earlier. I think there's really not that much like that kind of disparity because at least in terms of being able to buy it. But I don't know what I was going to say exactly.
Well, it's like even outside of money, where it's like, okay, you spent $12 on this perfectly fitting eBay suit. People will still like ignore that and say like, yeah, but you still chose to wear a suit.
Yeah, I think the thing that we can't that's hard to do is like, okay, well, why are you getting into it, right? Like this guy who's doing it has to be in pursuit of some kind of lifestyle social climbing thing, even though like we said there's not a lot of social mobility anymore. It's not really possible. there's still that perception of it, and it's not made better by what Kiyoshi said earlier, where not only are the brands kind of every time you see a lookbook or whatever, Suit Supply, H&M, Spear McKay, whatever, they're still there's just like clean cut person, whatever, modeling these clothes. Again, I do want to say a caveat because I don't know if we're projecting that. Because what if regular people like at what point are we going to see a guy wearing a suit in an advertisement and assume he's a regular guy and not a fancy rich man, right? I think that's going to be the true test where we can look at that and just be like, okay, because like, if you see like a lookbook with a guy wearing sneakers, right? You don't say, oh, that guy's a rich guy. You don't say that. You just say that's the guy wearing sneakers. But with a suit, at least for me, it's like, yeah, they're trying to portray a lifestyle, even if it's just a plain background, right? You're still playing into that kind of like slick, traditionally attractive thing. I don't know. Maybe it's the connotations are so strong that even I fall into that trap where I just assume like, it's like the doctor is a woman. What? So like it's like that thing where we just assume every guy wearing a suit in an advertisement is meant to signal a luxurious or an elite lifestyle. Because I think we all still kind of fall into that trap, right? Like it's still kind of
Well,
common.
it is sort of like we get the new shiny thing, and we do like there is a degree of like, hey, look at this new shiny thing I got. So like we do have that in some way, like, but we're not rubbing it in people's faces. We're just excited because we like it. That's the thing. That's the difference with
That
us.
is the thing.
But we do. It's not a shame to say we're excited.
Yes, Eric.
I gotta say, I disagree on this point just because I look at models and I think, no, these are like, people living on the outside of society just trying to model. You know what I mean? I'm not fooled by models in Drake's advertisements. I'm like, yeah, that guy didn't make that much money this year. Like he doesn't own the whole fucking Drake's wardrobe. You know what I'm saying?
Right, but I mean, but the character wearing it.
Yeah,
Like
I
this
don't know.
idea
I guess if
that
you're
these young
constructing
people-
a character, it's different. But like, I never look at a Drake's advertisement and think, yeah, that dude with like the middle part is fucking rolling in it and making a lot of money. Even like the menswear brands where it's like, oh my god, they work at the shop and they have like 10 suits or whatever. I'm like, no, I mean, like, I realize that these people are not that wealthy. Maybe
Yeah.
Matt Franek is the difference because he can fly Range Rovers into his apartment or whatever. Like, but other than him, I don't know. Like, it's
yeah,
hard
most
for me for the facade to overwhelm me. Like, oh my god, so aspirational. This 20-year-old must be making millions of dollars. Like, usually I'm like, no, this is a model. I get what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'd like the Drake's lookbook of all those like 24-year-olds hanging out in like a big
Right.
mansion in the English countryside. I wasn't like, how the fuck do they afford this place? Like
And how can I be that?
I wasn't thinking that.
But there is that idea though where it's tied, like the clothes are like that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to tie these clothes to that place. That's the whole idea behind an editorial or a lookbook.
Mhm.
There is a narrative there. Even with some self-awareness, you still have to agree that the brand is putting something out there. Like
I'll
that's what
give
Kyoshi.
Ethan the point on, older models where I'm like, okay, it's possible that maybe this 50-year-old is some boomer with a lot of money. But other than that, I don't know. Young people,
where's
I'm like,
that
I'm
ad?
skeptical.
But then the answer there, but like why do the models look this certain way though? Right? Like they don't. I think that maybe what we're approaching here is that like a lot of menswear stuff is clean cut. And it kind of reinforces that those ideas where the clean cut is the professional thing, right? You don't have like you don't really have like the Dove ads with menswear with suiting. You don't have that, you know, it's for everyone kind of appeal.
Yeah, there
right?
really isn't a lot of humor in menswear advertisements. I'm
Exactly. Yeah.
realizing.
So that's when I say these things, right? It's like it's not
Or
it's no overt
irreverence.
like thing. It's there is no real irreverence to it. It's still very straightforward in its presentation.
Mhm.
You know.
I mean that makes sense if you're trying to sell a product and it's expensive. You want people if people are going to be spending a lot of money on it, I think they'd be comfortable knowing that the company takes it seriously.
But maybe that
But
That's
humor
maybe not
could
how
help.
we think, but I think
there-
that's how most people think.
That humor
But
could
there are
help
other
in making it
expensive
less
things.
stuffy.
Yeah, well, yeah, not just that too, but there are other expensive things that are marketed, um, at least in clothing wise, irreverently compared to this, right? That's what makes it so different. There's still that kind of retaining thing, just like how, um, like fancy cars or like Tesla or whatever, even if they're not exactly outside the realm of income stuff or income levels, there's still a kind of modus operandi for those types of cars compared to like the more funny ones or irreverent ones you see from lower everyday ones, even if the difference isn't that much. Like I think like a low end BMW is like, actually I don't really remember, but like maybe it's like 60,000 compared to like a $30,000 car or like $40,000 car. So there's still that again, like that it's all about branding, right? And that's something you can't really knock, but it's still there. Why do they want to do it? Because they want to be perceived as that kind of high level brand. And then that feeds into, again, because brands are at the top, if it's top down stuff, that still feeds into how people expect other similar brands or things of that strata to be like. You know what I mean? And then of course, that's going to feed into, well, then they're not gonna, then if a brand wants to do something new, it's not going to sell because that's what other people want. It goes into that kind of like that Marvel aspect of, well, we want to make sure that we're following the right thing because that's where the money is, right? We can't afford to deviate.
Oh, did we lose him?
It's
Did we?
really hard
Oh,
to kind
no,
of
okay.
challenge this class. Oh, sorry. The aspiration of class and privilege within Menswear, because it's still kind of cyclical in terms of the branding. There's always subtle ways to kind of signal things, right? Like if all the models are white or something, right?
It's kind of what Apple did, right?
Yeah.
Not with the white models, or maybe with the white
Exactly.
models, but like they were also trying to sell a certain. I don't know if they're particularly trying to sell a lifestyle, but they're trying to sell a certain. Oh, this product is for you, whoever
Yeah.
you are, and it makes
yeah.
you. It was like what was the line in the movie? Social currency, something like that. If you're
Oh,
an
yeah.
Apple user, sounds kind of similar.
Yeah, I mean, there's always stuff like that. It's really hard to like technically combat because it involves a lot. Like it's not. I think I remember it from this what do you call it? An episode of Handcut Radio where Alex was talking to a watch enthusiast, and I think he said something about like it's got like to make watches accessible and to make it interesting and something that people can consider to be a hobby, not elitist. It's got to be on both the consumers and the brands to change. I could be remembering that wrong. Maybe it's not as hopeful as I wanted it to be, but I think that's kind of what I gathered. I think that's the same thing with menswear. It takes people, it takes like the Discord and things like Blamo to like kind of demystify what menswear is all about. But it's also got to be on the brands to kind of show that as well. And if the brands keep showing something like hanging out in the countryside wearing drakes or even the rake tailored garments, even though it's like $600 or $600-$700 for a full suit, but they're still like fucking in Italy on the side and in this fancy hotel room. It still is going to tie that together. So I don't know. I mean,
Crazy
there
stuff.
isn't really. Yeah, there really isn't a solution here. I mean, the
I
other
feel
side of
like
it
we say
too
that
is
at
that
the end of every episode.
There are no
yeah,
answers.
Well, there
There's
wasn't.
only
the answer is
Only Zool.
The prompt wasn't really necessarily a problem we're trying to solve.
Yeah, we don't solve problems
yeah,
on this
It's
podcast
but it
slash
would
stream. We
be
create them.
Yeah.
it would be nice if we could. But we can only do so much.
We're doing all we can.
Yeah,
be
we're
the
doing all
change
we
you want to
this is
can.
our
see.
limit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People
As
constantly
usual,
say to me, Spencer, you have to solve my problems. And I tell them, I'm doing my best.
Individually.
I'm
I-
trying.
You
Yeah.
solve my problems.
Again,
Really help
like
me out, buddy.
Mhm.
yeah.
That's
I
what
mean, like
want.
we said with like we said with Slouch, I think the most you can do is just kind of affect the environment around you and kind of encourage people and explain, what you're into, and hopefully other people will kind of get it again. And it's also like at some point, like we said with David, right? Like if they still feel schlubby, can't really change it if that's how they view it, right? You can't really do too much, because I think from the beginning here, a lot of us didn't really feel like this was as big of a class issue. I mean, it does play into the perceptions of class and aspiration, but in reality, when you look at it, it's not really that kind of a thing. It's just like any other hobby, or even, I guess maybe like I don't know, maybe being into cars might be the thing, because like you only need, like, you don't need more than one car, right? Like you just need to go from point A to point B. But
Yeah.
then there's a lot that go into like, oh, we want to get this car, you got to get this engine, you got to get these rims and the red brakes or whatever, and these style rims. So
But there's even
Yeah.
though it's not like 1-to-1 in terms of like money, there's still like
yeah,
entry level to, stupid levels of money in terms of cars too, right?
I think
yeah,
the big thing with cars is people are chasing an emotion, right? So you want the Ferrari because it revs super high and it's bright red and the doors open in a cool way and it just makes you feel things. But if you can't afford it, you find you look for pieces of that emotion that you can find in other places. And I think that's the big reason why a lot of people like Miatas, right? They're cheap and they're super fun.
Or Civics.
And I think
Oh.
menswear could be the same way, right? This idea
yes,
of like chase that emotion and get it wherever you can, whether that's thrifting or finding
up for
brands that are a little
Spear.
bit more accessible. Yeah,
I mean, that you probably just described exactly when people get into custom, why they go crazy on the details, because like that's something that you like, that rush of the bespoke, even if you've never really known what actually goes on into it. Like at Anderson Shepherd, they're not gonna say, "Hey, what color do you want your fucking lapel buttonhole? Do you want it in red? Do you want it in yellow?" Like they're not gonna do that. But because there's like that, again, that mystery behind it, right? Like when these guys are presented with options, they tend to go crazy, and it's, you can't really fault them too much for it, for enjoying the process, even though if it might not look good aesthetically at the end, or they might not like it. It's still, you know, that that aspect of like, yeah, chasing the high, chasing that rush you get from clothing, because it's like when you put on the garment that in your mind looks like the garments that you used to see in magazines, that's kind of a big deal. It's like, putting on, like, yeah, like a thrifted sack jacket and be like, wow, my shoulders look like Liverano because they're soft. I mean, even though they probably don't look that close to it, it's still like, whoa, this is so cool, and that's kind of what happens with any hobby, right? You kind of approximate, like, like with game or with tech, right? You could probably just upgrade your graphics card and immediately be like, oh shit, now what's next? Right?
Yeah.
Like, let's see what here before we close out here. Frog Lover says, sizing in menswear plays a big part in the privileges. Poorest people are often most likely to be overweight or fat, I guess. They are most least likely to find classic menswear in their sizes. And outside of bespoke, which is outside the price range of what a lot of people, but people without a lot of money to spend. Yeah, I mean, that's also kind of a big deal too. I mean, that kind of ties into the whole food thing that we talked about earlier. Food scarcity and food availability. And David says there's also the point that everyone here is part of self-selected sample who are all like inclined to feel a certain way about the subject. Despite how much we want to claim objectivity, we are here because we like menswear. You are absolutely correct. None of us here are on the outside and can't tell us otherwise if we look elitist or
Yep.
if we look too rich for our status, if we're trying too hard.
So I guess we'll
But
never know.
we'll never know. But hey, if the argument was made, this room is what matters and not the other rooms. Call back. But yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with any hobby, right? Like any guy, if you're not, if you were talking about how much people spent on the computer compared to a dude who has a fucking Chromebook, and that's the only thing he uses, he'd be like, why are you spending that much money on a graphics card? Why are you spending that much money on RAM? It'll happen in any
Dated
place
man.
for a server, exactly.
Yeah,
Well, I
it's a
think,
conundrum.
yeah, it's one that, is a great topic. I think our SaDCast Fanatic, Jeremy, for bringing it up to us in the Discord. But I think that'll do it for us tonight. It's 10 o'clock. Let's we just write down the time here and we'll wrap it up.